think we are live. Here we go. Okay, welcome everyone to the Home Services Summit webinar series. This event's all about getting you content and information unique to our business in the home services industry. And today we get to hear from Trent Halvorson from FranChoice. My name is Scott Abbott, co-founder of 5 Star Painting and CEO of ProNexis. At ProNexis, our mission is to transform the customer experience in the home services industry through voice, chat, text, and instant booking. Quick format before I do an introduction of Trent. So we're going to do about 45 minutes of just an interview where I'll ask a few questions, get some good content for you all, and then we'll open up the session to questions from the crew as you are watching live here on YouTube. What you'll do is if you have a question, go ahead and just hit the comment section on YouTube, enter it there, and I'll make sure I read that off at around 45 minutes to the hour. Some housekeeping items. So on the first Thursday of every month, we do this. And on November 4th, I'm not mistaken, October 4th. No, November 4th. My months are wrong. Time's flying in COVID land. And November 4th, we've got Doug Keneally, one of the founding partners of Princeton Equity Group. He'll be joining us. They're making some big moves in franchising, and he'll speaking about some of the investments they're making in home services and some of the brands they owned in the past and what they believe is happening in this great industry. So quick intro to Trent. Trent joined FranChoice in 2013 and has served the company in many capacities since then, including managing the selection process for new franchisors. So for those of you who are not currently working with FranChoice, Trent is the person you want to get to know. He does a lot of the training and supporting of the efforts of new and existing consultants and has trained dozens of franchise developers. So welcome, Trent. Thank you for joining us. How you been?
Been great, and thanks for having me.
So let's kick it right off with the first question, Trent. Like, why should a brand consider using a franchise broker or a franchise broker partner?
Yeah, I think, one of the advantages that I talk to franchisors quite often is just the ability on the quantity of leads and the quality of leads. I think with the ability of working with any consultant, broker, coach network, you gain the, first call it maybe 2 to 4 weeks of your process, and you really elevate it with quality. And I mean that because the consultant or the broker is going to take that candidate and really put them through some gates, if you will, to make sure, hey, I've got a live candidate, and really try to find the characteristics they're looking for that match up with that brand, that opportunity. We talk about organic portal leads, 1 out of 100, 1 out of 200.
Right.
And the ability to work with the consultant group just really elevates that candidate that comes in to start to look at franchisor's opportunity.
So let's dig into that a little bit. You mentioned there that as part of the sales process, you're working with some of these candidates for 2 to 4 weeks. What kind of things are your consultants doing to, I guess, qualify these candidates or make sure that they are the right fit for a brand?
Yeah, absolutely. And 2 to 4, maybe even 2 to 8 is an average time frame we're spending before they go out and actually look at the franchisors. Just got off the phone with a consultant that worked with a candidate for a year. It was an expat, finally came back. So first couple steps are honing in on what are their interests, what are their experiences, and then going through a series of calls talking about characteristics of a business. What are they looking for? And sometimes I'll tell the story of, tell my parents what I do is if a realtor sat down and said, hey, you're looking for a 4-bedroom, 3 bath on an acre lot, right? Those are 3 simple characteristics that a realtor can use to really simplify the process. Our consultants go deeper and really pull from the experience, but yet talk about characteristics. And then the big one too is also the financing piece, right? All of these businesses are funded somehow. And like anything, you want to make sure that is done up front. So we're not getting to the end of the process and somebody wants to take an opportunity, but we're waiting on funding. So a series of calls and gates, and that just means their actions are meeting what they're saying. So if they're missing calls, if the spouse isn't involved,
Mm-hmm.
those are key indicators that it might not be the right time for this candidate. However, if all of those things are in place, then we're feeling really good. Then it's time to get them over to the franchisor to start to investigate that process.
And so when you mentioned financing, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes, but I want to just kind of dig into that. So are you helping them go through an actual application process, get kind of like pre-approved like you would with a home, or are you matching them up and checking their credit with different or financing companies, or tell me more about how you guys do that.
Yeah, we'll take a high level financial peek to see what we're working with. We might have a conversation. Hey, is a parent involved, another partner involved? Do you have the ability to go grab more money if need be? Or is this the parameters we're working with as far as a net worth, a liquidity, and what they're willing to put towards a business? We'll have that conversation. And then we will make introductions to lending opportunities, really just so they can hear what their options are. There's a lot of ways to fund a business right now, and getting that conversation started early really puts that on the table, and then they can decide what option to fund this business, whatever makes most sense for their situation.
So let's kind of be specific around home services. I'm sure many of your candidates are looking for retail or maybe health and beauty or some other category, but we'll just talk home services for the moment. And let's say a candidate, is a clear, they're really interested in getting into the home services industry. When that happens, are you typically, presenting 3 or 4 brands, or like how do you decide how many brands to present to that candidate?
Yeah, typically it's 3, and I think looking at those characteristics that the candidate's looking for, there's always a compare and contrast. And sometimes you'll have an emerging brand with 10, 12, 15 units, and you might have a brand that's more established with 50 and maybe even more yet with 600 franchisees in their system. But yeah, we'll give typically not 3 in the same industry. We will have the variety in the industry, but yeah, I would say on average 3 opportunities to go and investigate.
And if that candidate, they're presented with 3 categories, let's say painting, because I love painting, bathrooms, because I own a bathroom franchise concept, and let's say blinds, because I own a blinds franchise concept. Let's say those 3 different concepts are being presented, and the candidate just doesn't fit with those 3. Will you then recycle that candidate for another business opportunity that may be a better fit, or how does that work?
Yeah, if we have to call a timeout, right? If they're saying, hey, those 3, during that process of learning more about them, and they kind of just come back to the consultant and say, time out, this is not what we're looking. We will start the process over, right?
Okay.
Obviously we missed something, or maybe they didn't reveal something, or throughout that process, that educational sales process, all of a sudden something either piqued their interest that they weren't interested in, or they all of a sudden want something else. So we'll almost pretty much from scratch start that process over, and just kind of step by step again to see if we miss something, or if that candidate is, let's say, divulging more information around what they're looking for.
Yeah. So 2 to 8 weeks, you really are spending a lot of time with these candidates, helping them understand the art of buying a franchise and getting the business for themselves. What would you say is kind of the average length from the moment a lead comes into FranChoice Consultant, and they've spoken to that lead, until that person actually makes a decision to buy a franchise and pay the franchise fee?
Yeah, if we just say they're now looking at brands, they're looking at opportunities, that's typically a 4 to 8 week, call it life cycle, if you will. Most of the franchisors we work with can get through, I'll call it the educational process. It is the sales process, but right, the franchisor can educate the candidate within about 4 weeks of the opportunity. Now, whether it's a confirmation day, a discovery day, a meet the team day, right? That event sometimes will make that process a little bit longer, but I would say starting talking to a consultant to signing, 8 to 10 weeks. And that's perfect scenario, right? That's
Yeah.
the candidate not taking vacation and that confirmation
Sure.
day, discovery day kind of lining up perfect.
Yeah. So about 2 to 3 months. That's about what I think we've experienced as well. So let's talk a little bit about what makes FranChoice different from maybe other broker partners in the franchising industry.
Yeah, and I think the appropriate place to start there is with our founder. Jeff Elgin started the business in 2000, and he sold franchises. So he has that direct experience selling franchises, working a lot of organic leads, doing a lot of call it guerrilla marketing back in the day, utilizing newspaper and radio, and then finding the consultant broker networks that existed in 2000 and really falling in love with that model and saying, man, this is kind of like a shortcut to adding franchisees to my systems. And then kind of took everything he learned and created FranChoice. So that's number one, our founder. And then number two is I think our consultants are really the magic juice, if you will, because they're independent contractors and they're truly dedicated to business ownership through the model of franchising. And they all work within the means of FranChoice. We'll call them full-time dedicated consultants that simply are there to help their candidates find the right business opportunity of a franchise. So those two things stand out. I think that we're independent contractors. They can help place, from New York to California if they have a candidate. And then our founders, just the business he's created and the mental model that he instills in the consultants.
And I think you mentioned earlier on our call that you've got, is it 75 or so consultants that are part of the franchise network?
Correct. And that's kind of been our number for years. And I think that number, coming to our conferences and watching the consultants get together, there's a bunch of conference call groups and they're sharing best practices. And I don't want to say they operate as one, but it is a very tight-knit group that are out there sharing best practices, sharing experiences, and celebrating the wins of each other. That it's just a really good feeling, and we can help the candidates that are out there with that group. And I don't see FranChoice having 125, 150 consultants ever. It's just I think the group that we've got are rock solid.
Yeah. And when you talk about 25 consultants, do those consultants have kind of team members with them that are assistants or other, or are all 75 people represented in that number?
Yeah, all 75. A couple will use admins and have support people. It might be a husband-wife team that some of them do some of the territory checks or call it the paperwork. But those consultants are running their business, interacting with the candidates on a daily basis.
And so to give everyone kind of who's listening an idea, how many placements would a FranChoice consultant make a year, on average?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's going to vary. So we'll probably talk about lead generation and things like that, like where do leads come from? And because FranChoice has been in business for 21 years, about to hit 22, a lot of our consultants build a referral network. Will they purchase leads and work on some other things? Yeah, but a lot of their leads, and we know the ones that go through to purchase are referred leads, are we'll call those the gold. So depending on where those referred leads are, it's going to vary. But I think I don't want to throw a number out there, but they're making a lot of placements, and they're having fun with it, and they're having a great time with the consultant during the process. And then for those that don't buy, staying in contact and making sure we check in and see how things are doing, because timing's so important. And for those that buy, they become lifelong friends.
Yeah, that's what it should be, really. Let's talk about, I think you mentioned earlier that is it 140 or so brands that you represent?
Yeah, we have about 140 brands, and
Okay.
I'll say we have about 115 active brands, and we can go deeper on that. But you get brands that are bought by private equity or bought by a parent company, or some maybe they lose a salesperson, and that happens from time to time. So yeah, I would say at any given time we're right around that 115 mark, and
Okay.
I'll call that a sweet spot for us.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. And so those that are in your network, and we'll talk about, well, how someone gets into the FranChoice inventory in a minute here. But before we do, there are kind of different levels, right, that they can join when they do join the FranChoice inventory. What are those levels, and how does one, I guess, qualify, or what is it kind of, what does the investment look like to be able to do that?
Yeah, so we do have two programs. We have what we call either our standard or silver program. And I often say that's kind of like a minor league program, and there's some differences in that program. And then we have the gold program that has been around for the 21 years. And that's kind of how the FranChoice business has been built, with upfront fee and then a long-term relationship. We just celebrated some franchisors with us for 21 years and also 20 years
Wow.
over the past 6 months. And that's what we're looking for, is long-term relationships. But yes, we have two tiers of inventory that we currently work with. And I think going back to one of the questions that was in that question was like, how do they? And I think, having conversations and making sure it's right for the franchisor and FranChoice, right? We need to perform for the franchisor. But, 4 buckets come to mind. Obviously, it's a long list of what we're looking for. But for the franchisors that are out there, number one, we're looking at unit economics. And we're not saying the investment's got to be $10 and you got to make $1 million. We just need it on par with other opportunities out there that the candidate might look at. So one of the things we're looking at is, what is the all-in investment? What's the potential for return? And you could say that's items 7 and 19. Maybe you don't have an item 19, and that's okay. We just need to have a feel for what is the unit economics of the opportunity. Second, we look for is pretty much nationwide open territory. And sometimes that's hard for the younger brands. But because of our consultants are across the U.S. and have open territories, if you will, they don't have any defined. We do look for brands that want to grow across the U.S. And maybe it's not in the registration states or odd states that don't have a ton of population. That's okay. The next bucket, so bucket number 3, would be the sales process. I again refer to it as the education process. It needs to be clearly defined. Sometimes brands come to me and say, hey, I'm the CEO, and I just answer all of their questions. And then I will share my tools to say, hey, let's make a clearly defined education process to make sure we can get a candidate from A to Z in a timely fashion, right? Some of those timelines we talked about is so important for that candidate to make a decision at the end of the process. And then we also look at that confirmation day, discovery day, meet the team day, whatever they call it, again, to make sure that we're not rehashing information, but we're really future looking. And I'll go a little bit deeper on that. So you're at a confirmation day, you've got 5 candidates there, and your training department comes up there and says, once you sign, I'm going to do this for you. And then the operations person says, once you sign, I'm going to help you do this, right? We're all future looking. We might cover some other things that you've already covered, but very future looking type of process. And then the last piece is validation. So if you have validation, we're looking for world-class. If you have 5 franchisees, all 5 need to be saying, this is the best thing since sliced bread. Love the franchisor, the founder's accessible, right? Or if you have 10, you've got 8 franchisees singing your praises. We're not looking for 100% all the time, but 2/3, if a lot of franchisors say have a third great, a third neutral, and a third negative, that's tough, right? Because 2/3 the time they're going to hear is neutral or negative. So validation needs to be strong. But those are the 4 main buckets, kind of that, call to, if you will. And then we get into leadership and financials of the organization. But those 4 big buckets is kind of where we start.
So do you guys actually call some of the franchisees before the brand is admitted into the inventory, or to kind of validate that there is validation?
Yeah, with that gold program, we do, right? So that's one of the differences of when we launch a gold company, those consultants know I've spent time with the franchisees, so they know their candidates are going to have great validation.
Wow.
So we do, yeah. And two things. One, we kind of act as a candidate to say, hey, how's support been? Is the opportunity, if you were to do it all over again, would you do it? But one of the questions I'd love to ask is the franchisor ready for growth? And are you ready for growth? Because sometimes that means the territory next to them is going to get sold to somebody else.
Yeah.
And for some, that can be fearful. So depending on the answers, sometimes we just go back to the franchisor and say, hey, let's educate the system on what growth means. And that really raises everybody when the system grows.
So this is, I mean, let's dive a little bit into the difference between silver and gold, because that's, I mean, that's pretty incredible. You're actually doing the validation calls, talking to franchisees, confirming that, you know, when your candidates come through and they call that brand, that they'll get what they need to get to be able to confirm that they should be buying that brand. So I'd love to know what other things are you doing when someone chooses to go from silver to gold, and to justify the investment they're making in doing that.
Yeah, so they would receive a 1 hour launch call. And that is kind of where we flip the light switch and turn them on to the consultants. So all the work, if a brand is not in our inventory, our consultants will never see or hear of it until we have the gold 1 hour launch call, is what we call it. And that's kind of when we reveal it to the consultants. So that, and then, and I'm sure we'll talk about later too, is those companies that make the decision to go in gold. We have conferences in January and July, and they're invited. And that just establishes those relationships. Again, top of mind for the brand awareness, and really can elevate the brand when you get in front of the consultants at a conference. So the gold companies are invited to those conferences that happen as well.
So if you're in the silver, you aren't invited to the annual, well, I guess biannual events, right? So January and July, you mentioned. So paying that fee gets you into that those events. You mentioned, I think, that your July event was in person, and is your January event in person as well?
We're planning for it. Yeah, we're looking to get into San Antonio, Texas. So I think everybody's crossing their fingers. We know this industry is all about relationships, and when you can see someone, it's a little bit more impactful. We had 2 that were virtual, so we can definitely do that and make the most of it. But yeah, we know with our Nashville conference in July that it was just a boost of business for everybody, and everybody kind of got that energy back. So yeah, it was good. And we do, just to be clear, we've had standard silver companies come to our conference because they've achieved a level, and it's kind of a moving target. So I can't go on record to say, hey, if you make 8 placements in a 6-month period, you're in. It's kind of a moving target. We look at performance, because at our conferences, we like to have those that are, active with us and making placements. We get into that chicken or the egg conversation a lot with brands, saying, hey, I need to be there to get the activity. Sometimes we look for activity and then you get to come. And I will say, hey, our conferences are invite only, but not mandatory. We know business happens. We know that franchisors have their own conference and whatnot. So that's with FranChoice.
Got it. And so let's, once you've made that investment, it's obviously silver is going to cost less than gold. I know there's a significant investment. We've made that investment ourselves a few times. I know it is a significant investment to make. For brands looking at joining FranChoice, is that a one-time fee to get into gold and then you're done for the life of your relationship with FranChoice, or do you have to re-up that at some point? Or I know there's a financial investment. There's also the time investment. So in my opinion, you've got to be doing the January and July shows in person if you're investing in gold, right? So there's a time piece as well. But what does it cost to attend those conventions or other, I guess, investments that someone should be looking at doing to make sure they're getting the most out of FranChoice?
Yes. So you're absolutely spot on. The financial investment right now, it's a one-time investment in that gold program. And like I said before, right? We look for long-term. The number of franchisors that have hit 10 and 15 years with us is mind-boggling to me, but we love it. And still being able to make placements in those systems is just that feel good moment. So that's the financial, and yeah, the time, absolutely. It's very important to say with anything, right? If we're a marketing arm to say, hey, set it and forget it, it just doesn't work. We need that activeness, utilizing our portal and attending the conferences and getting out there and being visible to our consultants. Our conferences range, right around 10 grand, all in travel, hotel. We host food, breakfast, lunch, dinners, the nightly events are all on us. We don't do sponsorships. It's just a one-time fee, treat everybody fairly.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think the conferences, the consultants love them, and the franchisors love them, right? The ability to get out there and connect with our consultants and connect with other franchisors around industry trends, whether it's a direct competitor or somebody else in an industry like theirs, or right, those service brands talking to brick and mortar and say, hey, how has COVID been for you? Right. All that dialogue is great for franchising in general.
So I'll just kind of restate that then. So it's about $10,000 to go to the events in January and in July. Those are in person. There's an investment up front to join. It's one time. And then there's a launch call after you join Gold that gets you into, announces you're in the inventory. That's about an hour with your consultants. Are there any other opportunities that a brand should be trying to leverage with FranChoice to get their name out there and get some exposure?
No, I think utilizing the portals, and we might do different things time to time. We'll host sales training in 2 weeks. We have a small group coming in for sales training. So franchisors that do come in, maybe they've hired a new operations person, a new VP, and somebody on their sales team. Yeah, we'll definitely help train. We've got a virtual component and then a physical component coming in. And we have a lot of resources that are out there too that we share with the franchisors, whether we're working with them or not. So, but those, you've kind of hit it on the Gold program. Yes, that's kind of the commitment level, time and money, and then just being active, I would say, throughout the course of the year. Absolutely.
Got it. Okay. So I know in the last 18 months, 2 years, COVID's been good to home services. We're seeing a lot of home service brands really excel. Unit sales are up in those categories. Who would have thunk it that home services would get so sexy? But it's happened, right? And I love it. But I'd love to hear about from your perspective, like what are you seeing at FranChoice in terms of brands that are moving in home services categories? Are there any certain categories that are really hot right now that are doing really, really well? And what are the numbers? Kind of 3-part question. What's moving?
Yep.
How much of an increase are we seeing in terms of the percentage growth we're seeing in franchise sales for home services? And then what are the top performing categories and your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So what's moving is definitely home services. Anything that's touching the home is definitely moving. Some additional service-based concepts are moving as well. But you're spot on. Anything touching the home is moving. And from a percent, we're seeing anywhere from high single digits, call it 8 to 10 to 40%. Like there's some concepts that are just going absolutely crazy right now. And I think it's twofold. It's what people are experiencing now currently with their employment and their job, and they're seeing what they're doing personally that's driving that. But I think also is the success of the franchisees in those home services is really driving the attention and the attraction. And it's no small feat. I mean, what they're doing, given the parameters of what's going on around them, is just great stuff. So that, in your last question, I apologize.
Yeah. So you mentioned, you said 8 to 40% growth. Is that growth in FranChoice's view of home service categories selling, or is that a growth per specific categories?
That would be across home services, what
Okay.
we're seeing.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. And you mentioned, obviously, there's no question that when a home service brand is doing really, really well, because people are buying more of home service, it obviously leads into more franchise sales. Which categories would you say are just doing really well? Like, name maybe a few of the home service categories you're selling a lot of.
Yeah. So, a couple, painting in general, right? We know when people went in, and this is probably early on. So, right, a year ago, what we saw with painting as an industry was just crazy. So much so, right, we're running into supply issues a lot of times now, because all of a sudden people are spending an additional 8 to 10 hours in their home. The office is getting repainted, every room's getting repainted. And then we saw it transition to, right, everything around the home. So the garage, and organization, whether that's the master closet getting organized, or maybe that's the kitchen getting organized. And then you go into the backyard and fence opportunities. I mean, it is just unreal. I would say, out there, that what didn't explode with a lot of those service-based, I'll call it, not one and done, but in and out, maybe concepts like a painting, or I'm going to come in and redo your garage. The residential cleaning, as kind of seen up and down, right? It's the acceptance of coming into my home. Hey, I want it clean and disinfected, but now I'm having somebody come in. So we've seen great growth in there. But then we've also heard that it's been pretty flat as well, that, hey, we lost a few people, but we definitely picked up some more customers. But other than that, call it, if it's a home improvement side, is definitely been great. I mean, just the junk hauling businesses, I think people started to do some deep cleaning, and those have been another one that have definitely skyrocketed over the last 18 months.
I'm actually in Las Vegas today at a golf event with some friends, and my wife is back home right now. Our entire garage is emptied, and it's being the epoxy floor is done. They're putting all kinds of cabinetry inside, and so the whole garage is being done. It's a direct result of COVID. We are cleansing. The junk guys are coming, and the home improvement guys are coming. So I think we're all experiencing stuff like that. So around lead gen, maybe speak to what you're seeing in terms of interest levels for franchising 2020, 2021, what your thoughts are on 2022. Are we up? Are we the same? Are we flat? What's going on?
Definitely up. And this is what I wake up smiling about being in franchising. One, it's just an amazing opportunity. I hope everybody listening feels great about what they're doing with their business, because having that yellow brick road for somebody else to hop on board and follow the path and execute a plan in franchising model is just phenomenal. So I think a couple things here. One, the employment, right, is just so unsteady that people are looking, and whether it's, hey, I'm cutting ties with my employer and I'm, going to go into business for myself, or, hey, in the next 2 to 3 years, I know I'm not going to be there, so I want to start something now. Money's extremely cheap, and money is available in a number of ways. And then the success, right? It's a proven track record with franchising and these businesses, and it's been so successful. I think so many times in the past we've heard, hey, recession resistant or recession resilient opportunities, and now this conversation around COVID, resistant, and that rings true to a lot of businesses, and I think that has just created some excitement. But I think that whole work from home, take control of your life, take control of your schedule for the most part, right? They're still, I'm sure, hopping on Zoom for 6 to 8 hours a day, but they have a little bit more flexibility. Opened up so many people's eyes to say, I kind of like this. I like being in control of my daily schedule. And that's what a lot of, franchise brands give a business owner, is that control.
So would you say, are you talking single digit growth in lead flow and franchise sales? Are we double digit growth at this point?
A double digit.
Wow, that's impressive. I mean, it's great for our industry, right? That we're seeing that more new entrants into the market. That's great. Love to hear that. Any issues that you're seeing around financing? I know that in home services, a lot of brands are part of an express loan, so they can get things done pretty quickly. I think it's 150 or less to get that done. What are you seeing that getting in the way of some deals closing? What's going on with financing?
Yeah, financing is a great topic in general. I think if you haven't had anybody on from the financing partners, I think, one avenue to look at, because definitely a full hour conversation. But yes, that SBA Express, and I think just SBA overall is definitely a delay in the process. I think in the past, it's probably been targeted right around 4 or 6 weeks. And now we're seeing, I'll call it 8 to 18 weeks. And that's why, with a consultant and having that so far upstream, hopefully some of that is eliminated around sit and wait for an SBA Express loan to come through if we can get started on it right away. But yeah, there's a delay definitely on that side of the funding. But it's not the only way. Is it a great way? Absolutely. It's just not the only way. And that's why, our consultants try to get that candidate involved in the funding conversation right away so they can find the best way.
Well, that's worth even speaking about just for a minute longer here. So we're seeing, I know SBA's offers really good rates for people, right? And it's an easy way to get financing if you're doing that 150 or less. So everyone wants to do those loans, but you were hinted maybe that there's other financing partners that you could use or leverage in the event that your deal's on week 18 or 17 and it still hasn't got financed yet. Are there other partners out there that you would recommend, and who are they and how long do they take? And give us a sense of what that looks like.
Yeah, I think that the funding partners we use are experienced in the finance or in the franchising realm, right? So folks like Guidant, FranFund, Benetrends, they're all great business partners of ours because they know the franchisor, they know their qualifications, they know the ins and outs of the franchising side, and they also know, right, the best ways to do those SBA Express, and they also know, hey, what it's like to borrow against the 401k and some of the other funding options that are out there. And talking to the candidate about that. How much cash do you need now? How much cash do you want in the future? Are you going to expand this business? Are you going to have to buy equipment down the road? And right, making sure they kind of cover the basis around what that business is, not only today getting out of the gate, but what does year 1, 2, and 3 look like? Conversations that might not be had that early on in the process really get that candidate thinking about the business big picture.
Yeah. Yeah, for those that can tap into their 401k, that's a great option. Great partners that you brought up there. I'm glad you brought them up. Are there any other more traditional banking partners that aren't leveraging 401ks that you guys recommend?
No, those are the 3 funding partners that our candidates most likely will talk to. Yeah, and I can't speak to terms, but I know some of the 401k, right? No penalty, no fees, and things like that for pulling out. Obviously, there's some fees for those guys setting up different entities, but there's some great options. I'm just not seasoned enough, or I guess educated enough on the financing side to speak specifically to what that looks like. But yeah, I'm sure on a business loan, there's a lot of places that you can go for one.
So let's maybe talk a little bit about some benchmarking around, what a franchise brand should it be expecting to be closing. And really, I want to talk about 2 things here. One is, where is FranChoice getting the candidates that are interested in buying a franchise with a franchise brand? And then second, when you are getting those candidates through to the franchisee, what should they be expecting to close as a percentage of the leads that you're sending them?
Yeah, great question. So let's first tackle where, right? And I think that question is the $1 million question, right? If we had the pot of gold to say, hey, here's where all the leads, the great leads are, we'd win. But I think what I've referred to in the past earlier on in the conversation is our referred leads are, what we call gold. Those are the great ones. But we also know, and like I said, our group of sharing best practices, one of our consultants came out of the med device or medical med field, right? And he says, hey, I know what these guys are going through, and it's 80 hours a week and they're on the road, and And if you just hit them with an opportunity like this, that they can do both, and then when it comes time retirement, well, and he was able to turn on just an amazing amount of leads based on he knew how to speak to them, and he shared that with all of our consultants. They're able to, I'll say prospect for that candidate.
Yep.
And that happens a lot where we hone in. Maybe we stumble across a Panera guy, in August, and he owns 20 Paneras, and maybe he doesn't want 21, but he wants another business. Maybe that touches, his Paneras, or maybe he just wants a business that has, for 5 locations, 1 employee. Great. And then, right, he tells his friends, back to that referred process. So I'll hone in on referred, and then some other prospecting marketing tactics that they use. But some of it's trial and error, and it's just really spending time with those candidates and putting their best foot forward to say, hey, I'll put in front of you a great process when working with me. Tell a friend if you'd like to. Otherwise, just that word of mouth when they're telling their friends and family, hey, I'm looking at buying a franchise, that get other people interested. So that's kind of where the leads are coming from. Okay. And then going into like numbers, I know we've had third parties and data companies say, look, FranChoice closes 1 out of 7. I also know we have franchisors that will close 1 out of 4 of our leads, and 1 out of 10 is a great number. So, really it's a moving target. But I think, speaking overall, consultant, broker, coach networks that are out there, if you're not closing 1 out of 10, 1 out of 15, and sometimes you do just get that candidate that it's a miss right out of the gate. So right, that number right around that 1 out of 10, 1 out of 15, I would start looking at my own internal process to say, what am I missing here? And is my educational sales process kind of in the right peaking events, right? So we're slowly, communicating to the candidate over time and piquing their interest. But so
that's a good benchmark. And I think that if we compare that to, I know we've had a few people on the show who've spoken to kind of some of those numbers and benchmarks. And there, if you're buying leads from portals, you're sub 1%. So you're gonna be prepared to talk to 100 people to finally get that one person that's interested. But to be in a place where, and this is where really FranChoice earns its keep, right? Like you're presenting people that are prepped, ready, finance ready, that are, as you mentioned, 1 in 10 is probably a pretty close number to what we've heard as a benchmark. But I think there's many brands who are selling 1 in 3, 1 in 4. I mean, if you're presenting 3 concepts to people and if they're buying, I would expect that getting to that 25% plus close rate is a matter of just perfecting your process and probably validation.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, great. So let's talk a little bit more about where these leads are coming from. And you mentioned there's a lot of networking as well. Your franchise consultants are pulling leads across the nation, right? So a franchise consultant with FranNet could be having they may be in New York, but they're work with candidates across the United States. Is that correct?
Yeah. So our consultants typically will market, prospect, have kind of call it their backyard. And then, maybe they went to college, at UC Berkeley, and they're on the business forum. So they're out there talking franchising, at UC Berkeley, and that sparks a lead source for them. Typically they have 2 or 3 markets, but the great thing about it is if they hone in on a process or a marketing, I hate the word tactic, but a marketing skill that attract the certain buyer for a concept, they can roll that out across the US and find placements that way.
Awesome. Well, we're coming to the end of my interview section. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to throw those into the comments before and while we're just waiting for some of those to come through. Trent, tell us about your background. Just before we started here earlier, this might be a tip and trick for those of you that are on these podcasts or webinars frequently. How did you do it? We like it. What'd you do?
Yeah. So background before FranChoice, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention I'm in Minnesota and I detasseled corn at 14, right? I said it, I did it. It's a great job. Then I spent a short term in a restaurant and learned the ins and outs of restaurant, and that's great. And then I found my niche in retail. And I was with Best Buy for 17 years and had a great run, great company. And then Jeff Elgin, founder of this company, started looking for an individual to replace someone that was moving on, and still they moved on and actually a consultant with us. And Jeff wanted somebody without industry franchising experience. He was going to teach that. And I had a blast my first 6 months at his desk every day, learning the ins and outs. So yeah, a lot of things carry over from retail and the genuine caring of people. And it's right. It's a different model of a corporate, but the franchising and P&Ls and so many things related. And I go back to the people there and the people here inside of franchising, just great people. And I'm having a blast.
Awesome. Love it. One question I probably should have asked earlier, and I'll just do now, is when someone joins a FranChoice inventory, there's obviously a commission that's being paid to FranChoice consultants for every sale that's made. How do you arrive at what that amount is? Is it as a percentage, or is it a fixed fee? And how do you deal with that?
Yeah, great question. So, in those early conversations around franchisors, that always comes up. Hey, what do I need to pay in a referral fee? And I say, what makes the most sense? And I'll share the ballpark, right? And it's a wide range. And what I say is a couple things. One, you're trying to get their attention, but we know that nobody can sell a concept on a referral fee alone. It just doesn't work like that. People are attracted to businesses and the characteristics. So sometimes they say, well, if I don't have the highest fee, no, not the case. What we say is you need to be competitive. So I'll give the range. The franchisor gets to pick. Some people say, yes, it's a percentage. Sure, we can put a percentage on it. But really the franchisor picks, here's the range we're looking for. And I don't make it a big deal. It's up to the franchisor to decide that.
The franchise consultant, though, they know in advance of presenting the brands, they know what that commission is going to be, right? That's part of, I'm assuming, the profile of any brand in your system.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
Yeah. So, to give people a sense, are we talking 15,000? Are we talking 30,000? What is it, like that wide of a range really per brand?
Yeah. So inside of, I'll just say between our standard inventory and our gold inventory.
Yeah.
Yep. I think 15,000 to 50,000 on a single unit placement would probably be the range.
Okay. Wow. That's a pretty big difference, right? For a franchise consultant, if they're staring at a $50,000 commission. Now, obviously it has to fit the bill for what the candidate's looking for, clearly, right?
Yeah.
But a $50,000 commission is significant. Maybe I'll just speak to that a little bit more as well, because one of the, I think, controversial subjects in franchise sales is this whole multi-unit idea, especially in home services. It happens to us once in a while where someone really wants to buy and they want to lock up 2 territories, for example. And so we concede, and we'll do that from time to time, but I've never really liked selling 4-packs and 5-packs. How often is that happening in home services in FranChoice? Are we seeing more and more pressure to buy more locations at the beginning? What does that look like right now for you guys?
No, I think you're spot on, and we probably share some of the same vision there around. I think for FranChoice, the point of view is what's the earning potential with one territory, right? And does that mean you have to have a 5% market share or a 50% market share? And I think that in conjunction of what financial means and resources that candidate has. I think everybody has to make a smart decision. That means the franchisor, that means the guidance of the FranChoice consultant, and the candidate have to say, big picture here, because buying zip codes, buying territory just to kind of put their name on it doesn't do anybody good. And it's actually a disservice to everybody involved. Now, if they're going to go out there and operate it, and they have a team or they have a roadmap to get there, No, I don't think there's pressure. As long as the financial goals can be met for the candidate within one territory, green light one territory, have at it.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully, if they want more in the future, it's available. But we know sometimes things sell fast.
Yeah.
So I think definitely case by case. We are not advocates to go out there and buy 2 and 3 territories.
Okay.
Now, I
Yeah.
think for that one candidate that says, hey, here's my team that has already done this once before.
Yeah.
These are my financial goals that I want to hit. Okay, then it makes sense. But
yeah. There's definitely some candidates that come in that are looking at, they want to build a $4 or $5 million business. They know they can't do it with one territory, so they end up locking up 2 or 3 at the beginning. And we've seen that happen. We've also seen a lot of guys just start with 1, then buy 2 or 3 later on, right? So that's just part of the game. We've got a question here from Paul Lindenberg from Gotcha Covered. Hey, Paul, good to see you on here. Are there any micro or short-term trends happening in FranDev right now that might give us a view into what we can expect economically in 2022? And if that question is too long for you, it's rewritten just below on the screen here, Trent. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah,
there.
and I'm trying to think of, and maybe this doesn't hit Paul's question, but I think one of the trends I'm definitely seeing is franchisors trying to get to that magic, we'll call it private equity number to sell. Like, I think a lot of folks are coming into the game, or if they've been in the game, are now have a target in mind to get to 100 sold or 100 open, right? And for the simple fact of selling the private equity.
Mm-hmm.
But and that's minute. I don't see it as a big problem. So, maybe a small trend, but I mean, you definitely feel, I don't want to say big guys buying up smaller guys, whether it's a parent company or private equity, and not all brands that are in that, emerging side have that, but I feel a few do, and they're trying to, I don't want to say take shortcuts, but getting there the fastest way might be in mind versus doing it the smartest way or safest way.
Yeah, that's a good point, Trent. There's definitely, there's no question. We all want growth, right? But sometimes growth can be detrimental to the brand long term if you go too quick and you're not supporting it properly with the right people. I can see that being an issue. Do you feel like there's any, everyone asks a question around COVID, and I think maybe Paul's trying to get this as well, that maybe COVID is, giving us a COVID bump in home services, and that this isn't really sustainable. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, it's been 18 months. And it just keeps growing, right? We just keep seeing more and more demand. Do you feel like, though, when we get out of this pandemic, are we going to see a drop off, or do you think this is a movement in general to people wanting more flexibility and in general want business ownership so they can avoid having to go back to the office?
Yeah, as far as a candidate, I think this is for the long haul, and even for the franchisee, I think people have kind of peeled back, and I know in my home, we kind of have what we're doing this year, next year, and the year after to the home that we really haven't sat down and made that plan. So a franchisee, I see it long term, still people investing money. And on the candidate side, absolutely yes, because I think as businesses change, we know there's going to be layoffs in this type of industry and growth in this industry, but we also know the age range of the baby boomers, and those guys aren't going to want to retire. They grew up working 40, 50, 60 hours a week. And a good chunk of those individuals, when they see the end is near, as far as what their employer that they might have been with for 20 years, they're going to go find something else to lead and grow. And that's going to be a franchise. And I think we're just on the tip of the iceberg of seeing a lot of that, right? So I think for franchisors, if you're not thinking your franchisees could be in that 50 to 60 range, you might want to relook at that and say, hey, how could we have a system that supports a franchisee coming in that age range, and really let them grow their own business?
I'll just maybe end with this comment around my experience around the last recession we had in 2009 when I was franchising back then. We had that I started in 2005. We had that kind of boom in home services and in construction in general across the US, and then that bubble popped. What was interesting, though, is that in 2009, our franchisees, like on same store basis, kept growing. So the model itself actually was doing really well, even the recession, 2008, 2009, 2010. But what fell apart completely was franchise sales. No one could get financing at all. And so no recession is the same. I think we all know it's going to happen. We've been talking about there being a recession since 2012. Like it's supposed to happen again at some point. It's been 9 years of growth. Who knows when we ever see that happen again? But if it does happen again, I feel like we're well positioned in home services because people just are becoming less capable of fixing their own homes. So that tailwind is helping our industry. And the only thing that really stops people from buying a franchise is the financing piece. As long as our financing stuff stays together, and unemployment rates normally actually help drive franchise sales. I know, Trent, you've probably seen this as well, that when unemployment rates come up, usually people are looking for a way to provide for their family. And that's one of the ways they do this is get into business ownership. So I almost feel like if we see an unemployment number pick up and a recession happen, that we'll see actually an increase in interest in franchising. And home services tends to be very, as you mentioned, recession resilient. So great commentary. Thank you so much, Trent, for joining us today on the show and answering all these questions. Trent, for those of our listeners that want to get in touch with FranChoice and maybe look at being part of your inventory, you're the person, I'm assuming, to do that?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. If you don't mind, maybe what's your email address, or how should they reach out to you? What's the website they should go to learn more?
Yeah, you can find my contact on the franchoice.com, but I'll put my cell phone and my email out quick.
Okay.
It's just the letter T, Halvorson, so THALVORSON at franchoice.com. And the cell phone is 612-670-8674. And if you're interested in FranChoice or talk about some of those tools that I'm happy to share with anybody, reach out and love to have a conversation.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Trent. Thanks, everyone.
You bet. Thanks, Scott.